Let's animate the fueling line. Guess what? We are just about finished. After we're done with this lesson, all we have left to do is a bit of cleanup work, just making sure we're pleased with how the animation has come along, looking for any areas to touch up, and then I'll show you how to create a real-time preview, because we don't want to always rely on the playback in Max's viewport. So it'd be a good idea to create a quick render before we're ready to hand our file off, just for approval. So let's go ahead and move over to our perspective view and get right to work. We'll grab our layer manager and let's go ahead and show objects to hide so we can start to animate our IK goal as well as the bone objects that deform our fueling line. If we were to go ahead and head over to key filters, we can check our settings. As of right now, we can uncheck position and custom attributes because we're just worried about setting keyframes on the rotation of our bones after we have switched to FK or forward kinematics. Now what about IK? We do need to tell the system to turn off at some point and animate that change. Well, what's really cool about auto key is that it's going to save a keyframe no matter what our key filters are set to. So as long as we create a change, that change will be saved. So with our IK goal selected, if we were to move to our motion panel, we could decide on a time when the fueling line should fall. Let's go ahead and press Alt-W so we can take a look at our shot camera. I'll close out the layer manager. We'll go ahead and take a look at things from the shot camera, and let's decide on a time when the fueling line should fall, and this is just before the aircraft starts to take off. So let's say this happens around frame 63. Alright, so now that we have chosen a frame, we can now go to our perspective view, and on 63 we could go ahead and turn off the switch, making sure again auto key is on. We'll go ahead and turn off enabled. Alright, so here's what happens now. What I'll do is go to about frame 55 just to show you this. If we were to go ahead and take our ship and start to move it, you could see the fueling line will follow. The inverse kinematic handle has been parented to our ship. We've done that in the rigging section. That's going to go ahead and follow. However, if I were to just go ahead and undo that back, after frame 63, from 63 on, you can see that when we go ahead and take our control and start to move it, the hose will no longer follow the ship. So that's what that enabled button does. It turns on and off the IK system. Alright, great. So I think it's time to animate some rotation. Let's go in and grab the bones that we need to animate. So we're basically looking at the point at which the fueling line curls up, and we're going to grab the bone object that we need from that curl up point on, because those are the only bone objects we'll need to animate here. It's going to go by fairly quickly. Let's go ahead and double click the bone that is labeled 007. We'll go ahead and double click that to grab the entire chain here. Your bone object might be named something different if you were not using the same project files that we used when we started animation. If you're using your project files, your bone object might be named something slightly different. Depends on how many bones you've added. But you get the idea. We're just grabbing the bone at the curl up point of the fueling line. Alright, so once we've double clicked to grab the entire hierarchy, on frame 63 we can go to our big key button and set rotational keyframes. Let's go ahead and scrub through to make sure everything is still working properly. Alright, great. Now we could go ahead and have the fueling line fall. So let's have that happen just a few frames after. Let's say on about frame 70. So we're going to make sure that these fall at the same time, and then I'll show you a cool follow-through trick to break up that timing for something that would be more convincing. So on frame 70, again, we're just curling the fueling line down. If there's a little bit of interpenetration between the fueling line's geometry and our fueling station's landing pad, that's just fine. We just don't want too much interpenetration. We don't want it going through too much. But If it touches slightly, no worries at all, because it's not noticeable. Alright, we'll go to the next bone object, start curling that down in the bend axis. We can press page down to move down our hierarchy and go to the next bone object and bring that down. You might find that eventually we'll run into intersecting between the hose and our landing gear. No worries. We're just blocking this in right now, and then we'll worry about curling the fueling line so it no longer intersects. Alright, great, so that looks good. Now, just to be on the safe side, let's go ahead and press Alt-W, and in the shot camera view, we're going to go ahead and turn on realistic mode so we can keep track of our shadows here, just to make sure, again, that the fueling line has been rotated to touch the platform properly. Alright, so take a look. We've animated this fall. This is looking pretty good. Now take a look at the IK goal. Because we've added some rotation here, what we need to do is make sure that our IK goal is locked down at the point it needs to be locked down. Alright, so a quick way to adjust this, I'll just go ahead and press the W key. But a quick way to fix this is to go ahead and take the key from frame 0 where it is in the place it should be at. We can hold down shift and we can go ahead and drag all the way to frame 63 where we have started the animation. So there's 62, there's 63. Great. Now all that means is all we need to do now is head over to 63 and turn off the enabled switch, and now the IK goal will stay put and the hose will fall when it needs to. Alright, great. So now let's go ahead and work on having it curl away from the landing gear. It would be a problem if it was stuck on the landing gear. The pilot would probably have a lot of issues. So let's go in and start to curl the fueling line a bit. We don't need to curl it using every bone object here. We could just go in and curl what's needed. So right now I'm curling bone 18. I might press page up to move up one level in our hierarchy and curl that as well, just slightly. And now we could use page down just a few times until we get to about bone 20. Go ahead and curl that. And all this was done on frame 70, so it will curl at the right time. Now it looks like we could go ahead and bring up the end of the hose. I'm going to go ahead and press page down to grab the very end of our hose and bring it up so it's not interpenetrating too much with the platform. Alright, great. So now what I'd like to do is show you a cool follow-through trick. It's really neat and very fast to do. It's just a matter of offsetting our keyframe. So here's how we'll do this. We'll go to the first bone that we animated, which is bone 7. We can press Control page down. That's another way to grab the hierarchy from then on. And we're going to go ahead and start offsetting our keyframes. Now, if we go ahead and take this first key, just kind of drag it down, that might slow down the timing of the initial bone too much. Even a one frame change might be too much at times. So we might go ahead and leave the key on frame 70 here for bone 7. Then we could go ahead and select the bone that follows, bone 17, press Control page down, and then start to drag from there. So it's just your choice. If you find that from 63 to 70 that it's a bit too fast, you might go ahead and delay the keys. But if you find that by delaying the keys it's a bit too slow, well, you might go ahead and leave that initial key on frame 70 on bone 7 and just go ahead and start from 17. So with 17 on selected, I'll go ahead and drag the keyframes just one frame down. We can now go to the next bone object, which is bone 8. I'm going to hold down Control, press page down, and then offset the key one frame. So you get the idea, and you could already start to see a change. I'll go to the next bone object, press Control page down, delay the key one frame. Go to the next bone object. Again, Control page down. Remember, you could always double click on the bone to grab the hierarchy. That's another way we can do that. Alright, we're just about finished. We'll grab the next bone, Control page down, drag that down one frame, and now we've reached the last bone that we need to worry about, bone 21. Just go ahead and take that and drag it one frame down. So what we get is this this follow through where things don't fall at the same time. It's exactly what we want. And now we can add a drag to kind of curl the hose to fix its line of action, make it look a little bit more interesting. So we could just go in and start to curl the bone objects that we need to create a nice looking curl. So I have bone 19 selected. We could always go to the last bone that we need to animate here, bone 21, and then curl that back as well. And that should take care of that. Again, I've animated that curl on frame 67. Alright, great. Now it looks like one of these objects, they need to fall to the floor. I bet it's bone 19, one of the bones that were curled. No worries, I'll go ahead and just drag that down to the floor. Very nice. Okay, so it is now time to animate a bit of a bounce. And this doesn't have to be done on every bone. We could go ahead and start the bounce on the bone that we started the animation with. So I'll go ahead and press page up until we get to bone 7. So as it falls, just a few frames after, on frame 72, we could go ahead and have it rotate up in its curl axis just slightly. And then we could go ahead and have the hose fall on 74. If we hold down Shift and drag from 70 to 74, we can clone our key quickly to make sure that the fueling line falls and hits the floor the way it should. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look. We'll focus on our shot camera. Let's go ahead and play this back. Very nice. Alright, so take a look at that. We've animated our fueling line to fall. If you wanted to add a little bit more to this, I don't want to get out of hand here, but animation is really fun. But as the fueling line hits the floor and bounces up, we could take the end and actually curl that down on about 72. We could go ahead and bring that down so it kind of touches the floor for weight. And then we can bring it up just a few frames after on 74. And then by the time we get to 76, it falls to the floor again, so we get a nice little bounce that transfers throughout the entire part of the hose that we animated, just to make sure that that energy looks realistic when we play it back, and that looks much better in my opinion. Very nice. So take a look at that. In no time at all, we have our fueling line animated. So this is going to be really exciting when it's time to render this. And speaking of rendering, we're about ready to do a real-time preview. What we'll do is stop the lesson here. In the next lesson, we'll check to make sure everything looks good. If we need to make any tweaks, we can. And then we'll go ahead and create a preview of our animation that we can OK before we hand off the file to the next artist to do their part of the job on this little production piece.